Now, the other thing I remember about you, again from a distance, when I arrived in Austin, is it wasn't too long after I was here. I recognized you as sort of an established artist on the club circuit and whatnot. And then the thing that I remember was you were being courted by Lars Ulrich from Metallica. So tell which band, which this is your project called Goudie, right? This is your self-named band. So after your various other bands, your next and latest project at the time was just called Goudie, and you got the attention of Lars somehow.
Yeah.
How did that all happen?
It took a lot of work.
And when was it?
That was in 1997. I met this guy who worked at Hamstein. Remember that publishing company?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. So he worked at Hamstein, but like in the tape room, remember in the basement, they had that room where they dubbed cassettes and CDs and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So he was the guy that ran that tape dubbing room.
Do you remember the guy's name?
Of course. He was still one of my very close friends, Martin Hanlon. You know him.
Okay.
The Scottish dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he worked there.
My favorite thing about Martin was he would say these words and they were just like, "Do you like breakfast?" And it wouldn't sound like, "Do you like breakfast?" Like, like it was like, "Do you like Portishead?" You know, I'm saying, "Are you a fan of Portishead?" The band Portishead. "Do you like Portishead?" Yeah. So I remember Martin. He was a lot of fun.
Great guy. So he took an interest in my songs and in me and Einar, what we were trying to do. And he was like, "Man, you're kind of, it seems like you guys have gotten off the track and you're just like, you become like a 3-set bar band trying to make a living playing music. And, you know, you end up playing like The Joker by Steve Miller. Instead of like focusing on writing the best songs you possibly can, you're out like two buffoons, you know, playing, you know, at the Cantina Santa Fe in Corpus, you know, and just not really doing the thing that you should be doing to take steps forward in a career."
Okay.
And he was right. And so we just kind of like, we had a talk with our drummer at the time. He did not want to commit to working, you know what I mean? Like, hey, we're going to stop playing a lot of gigs and we're just going to rehearse every day and we're going to try and do this thing. So through his connections at Hamstein, Martin got us in, me and Einar in the studio to, Einar Peterson is a dude that he joined when he was in Mr. Rocket Baby, but he also played with, you guys remember The Awful Truth, David Von Olerking? They were on Metal Blade Records, like a trio. And a couple of it, like the rhythm section went on to start Galactic Cowboys.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Monty and Alan.
Yeah.
So the band that they were, so Einar was playing with this dude, David. David and me were real close, and that's how I became friends with Einar. But they moved here from Houston, and Einar was living on my couch, and the Mr. Rocket Baby bass player quit, and it was awesome. I had a great bass player just living on my couch. So
Einar is
we ended up playing together.
Amazing bass player.
Amazing musician. Yeah, amazing musician, amazing dude. And so Martin was basically like, "Hey, you got to restructure your thing. You got to figure out who you are. Write songs all the time, rehearse all the time, get a real band together that wants to work, that wants to take, you know, significant steps forward. And, you know, if you do this shit, if you follow my playbook, you'll be signed in a year." And it was like a year and 5 months. So he was like, he got everybody he could get involved with. He was really close friends with Jim Kerr from Simple Minds. And Jim and Paul Kerr at one point started a management company. And so it was like Martin, Jim and Paul Kerr, and then this other guy named Jed Malone, who was married to Jane Weedland from the Go-Go's.
Wow.
Who also, it took like a village of rock stars to help Goudie get noticed by the world's biggest rock star. Like that's basically what it's like Jim, Jane, everybody was taking meetings with people on our behalf. And like, it was really unbelievably flattering. And it was really cool that Martin was the drummer of this great Scottish band from the 80s called the Silencers. Jim obviously was one of my favorite singers from one of my favorite bands growing up, Simple Minds. And Jane Weedland, I'm a huge Go-Go's fan anyway. And then we ended up working on a lot of music together and are still, you know, really close friends. And
you played in the Kathy Valentine and the Blue Bonnets.
Yeah,
You played with them for a little bit.
we have a band. Yeah. We have it's been on. It's not a real band. Like every time it starts to get real, something happens and someone can't do it. But
all right.
But it's the Blue Bonnets with me. But we do shows. It was called Johnny in the Ladies Room, and now it's called Lady Band Johnson.
Right. I read that somewhere, Wikipedia. And I like how it's deformed into this other name.
Well, Kathy, full disclosure.
Johnny in the Ladies Room, I really like because it sounds like a dirty rock and roll band.
It does. Yeah. It totally does.
Yeah.
But Kathy didn't like my name.
Of course not. Of course not.
It's the truth, she didn't.
It makes me think of Gene Simmons, and most people, when you think of Gene Simmons, it's hit or miss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Mm. So there was a guy. There's a guy named Dan McCarroll who ended up being like the president of all of music, but he was a drummer that played with Amy Mann, Michael Penn, and these kind of people. And he was getting tired of the hustle of being a side guy in LA and trying to make ends meet. And like, you have a great gig and your life is great. And then, that band decides not to tour for 3 years and you're fucked. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So he wanted to find some kind of job. So he tried to get a job in A&R at a publishing company, and there was another Scottish guy there, this guy Kenny McPherson at Warner Chappell, who basically was like, if you want to be an A&R guy, here's a box of tapes. Go home and listen to these and tell me which 3 bands you would sign. And He came back, and we were one of the bands, and he was like, that's a band I really like. And so there was no room for him at Warner Chappell at the time. But then this guy Tim Duffy and he were friends, and he was like, hey, Lars Ulrich starting a record label, and why don't you be the A&R guy of the record label? And he was like, okay. And then he met with Lars, and Lars was like, what would, do you have anything that you would want to bring to the table? And it was just our cassette. Wow. And Lars was like, I like these guys. And so that was it.
What? So were you officially signed to Lars's label?
I was, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
we had a record that came out on there.
Okay. What's the title of the album?
The album's called Peep Show.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So did you, in the course of all this business and dealing with Lars's record label, did you ever have a sit down face to face with Lars and
I spent the night at his house and jam? Like, yeah, we were friends. We talked on the phone every day for a while. And at one point we parted ways with Martin. Like, I don't know if you guys know what happened with us, but we went to Los Angeles, like full fucking thing, recorded at Sunset Sound. And David Bearwald had a studio out there called the Palindrome, and we had that for a while. We worked with Fred Marr, who had done Matthew's Sweet Girlfriend and Lou Reed's New York and stuff like that. We were so blowing, doing the whole, like, the thing. When you get a record deal, you go to LA, you make this record, you work in all the best places with all the best people. And then when it was time to mix it, like after the first week of mixing, we were all kind of like listening to the first couple of songs in our apartment at the Oakwood in LA, and just like, man, I don't really, do you guys like this? Like, no, this is just not very good. And then Lars called on that Sunday, and he was like, hey, have you guys been listening to this? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I don't like the direction this took. And we're like, no, neither do we.
Yeah.
Wow. And so there was a time of much turmoil. We fired Martin. We fired the team that was producing the record. We came back. I cried in front of Snoop Dogg, who took pity on me and hugged me. And, let me tell you this. You guys friends with Danny Crooks?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. I don't know them personally, but I know of them, of course.
So you used to go to Steamboat. When you'd hug Danny, there were 2 things. He smelled like weed, really good weed, and some kind of cologne that he was into.
That's right.
When we hugged Snoop for the first time, Einar and I walked away and we looked at each other. We were like, He smells just like Danny. He looks and uses the same cologne as Danny.
Wow.
It was so weird. Anyway, so we fire all those guys, and then there was a whole weird time where they were taking our stuff to all these different mixing guys, and they were like, "No, we hate this. We would rather mix their demos," and all. It was freaky, and everything. We were hanging on by a thread. Like Elektra did not want to spend any more money on this band for this guy's vanity label.
Right.
But at the time, Metallica themselves, this is a fucking weirdest fact. In 1998, when we signed our label, well, I assume it was 1999 too, Metallica made up for 1/4 of all of the income that Elektra Records. And I'm talking about the fucking Doors, the Eagles, like Tracy Chapman had hits at the time. I mean, they're Elektra Records, and Metallica in the late 90s was literally responsible for 1/4 of their income.
Wow.
Like the whole label.
They had the catalog, and they had the Black Album, which is it's like Dark Side of the Moon or something.
They had Motley Crue too, which wasn't chump change.
Right.